All right, well, welcome to the Right to Win Ozarks podcast. We're your hosts, Gretchen and Deborah. In this episode, we are lucky to have been joined by State Legislator Bob Titus, a dedicated public servant who is ready to discuss the challenges, opportunities, and future of District 139. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So glad you're here. So I was looking today, the legislature has been really, it seems a little crazy what's been going on. But I noticed that it looks like the Republican supermajority is not quite interested sometimes in some of the same things that constituents are interested in. And so I went through your House resolution, which is wonderful, actually, that talks about urging the U.S. government to condemn human rights violations in North Korea. No one's talking about North Korea right now. But so I went through that, and then I went through some of the co-sponsored bills that you've had, and these are extremely important bills. The silver and gold bill that Bill Hardwick has, HB 433. He's got Bill Hardwick has HB 434, which is his bill to establish the anti-red flag gun seizure act. We saw Maisie Christensen, who has a bill very similar to that. We're looking at Philip Orler-King, is that his name? Did I pronounce that?
Yeah, very close.
Okay. His HB 477 bill to establish written parental consent for IEPs, individual education plans for students. We're looking at HB 1072, the Missouri Equal Protection Act. That's the prenatal Equal Protection Act that Justin Sparks has put forth. There's several of these bills that you've co-sponsored, and every single one of them, Representative Titus is not getting a hearing except for Kathy Jo Loy's HB 75, the Missouri Religious Freedom Protection Act, which is it's gone through perfection at this point, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what's going on with these very important? We have a SEPA bill that hasn't been looked at, I think. What is the priority of the legislature at this point?
Well, I mean, bottom line, the priority is whatever the speaker says it is. And I mean, he's kind of cloaked in what his priorities are. There's his stated priorities, and there are the priorities that you see in action with what has been accomplished in the House. And so this is not a new problem, and we've had this year after year after year after year, and we need to break free of it. But yeah, absolutely, we have wonderful bills that really need some attention, some consideration, and need to be passed. But filing bills accomplishes nothing. It's when bills move to committee, when bills move out of committee, when they move to the floor for consideration. That's when a bill is getting the adequate amount of attention. Well, we don't see that happening with a lot of conservative bills.
That's right. I call Patterson the Dread Pirate Patterson because he has it seems like as a quote unquote Republican, his priorities differ greatly from many of the representatives in our legislature. And in essence, because he is able to be the one who determines what gets heard on the floor, he's able to promote things that many constituents don't really care about and may even actively oppose. And it seems to leave a great deal of constituents in Missouri without representation because their own legislators are not able to get bills heard. Is that the case?
Yeah, no, essentially that amounts to one district in the whole state is leading what we get legislatively. And that's Patterson's district. And, he's in a 50-50 district. And yeah, he won by a hair. Yeah. But the fact is, I think Missouri is a solidly conservative state. And we don't need to be ruled and governed and forced to have an output that is based on a 50-50 district. And I get it that he's representing his district. And where we made that mistake is in selecting a speaker who was going to represent a district like that. And I'm not, JP, John Patterson's a wonderful person, but personally, but as far as leading the House in what's conservatively constructive, that's just not happening. And there were a lot of promises made, especially in the wake of the Sparks contest on that. And, those, I think a lot of that is getting a lot of show attention. But I mean, we'll know at the end of the session what real attention, what constructive attention conservative bills got. And my prediction is that it'll be similar to past sessions where all that kind of gets swept under the rug at the very end.
I tend to agree with you, and having my ear on the ground in the grassroots, they are very, very concerned that this is just a replay of what's gone on in past years. And it's very disheartening. So we have the Brave 10. What can we do as constituents to aid our representatives in trying to fix the situation?
Well, I'm assuming most of your audience is in Christian County. I know that you have people outside of Christian County. Honestly, just to pat ourselves on the back, I think down in our corner of the state, we've got things right. And we hold our legislators accountable. We send good conservative legislators up to Jefferson City to represent you. I mean, there's some minor exceptions to that, but for the most part, as a body, Southwest Missouri, I think, is doing a pretty good job. The problem is we don't see that across the state, and we have Republican voters who don't invest in holding their representatives accountable, and that goes for the Senate too. You really need to select people of conviction, people who have been vetted. Not people who talk well, not people who saying out of the conservative chorus book, but those who really convictionally are conservative. And you've got to be able to recognize that in people that you support as candidates. So this is where we're falling. It's all falling through the cracks. Is we have people come up here who have campaigned as one thing, and then they legislate as something else entirely. And I'm not saying that they're all rhinos, but I'm saying that there are a lot of conservatives who present themselves as conservatives, and when they come up here, they understand that to play the game that the game of success up here in the Missouri House, they basically follow a whole different set of rules that is defined mostly by the leadership. And, until we dispense with that, we're going to keep getting the same thing over and over and over again. And I gave up a job to come up, and I'm giving up time with my family to be up here. I don't need another career. I didn't wish for a political career. In fact, I'm kind of a private person. But I made that sacrifice to come up here and make a difference. And I know many of my colleagues, are of the same frame of mind, but there's not enough of us. There's too many of my colleagues who want to make a career of it and want to please the wrong people. And until we can change that, we're stuck on that track. And honestly, the grassroots is the answer. We need people who get involved and stay involved, hold their representatives and senators accountable. And when they don't behave as the voters expect them to, there needs to be some, I guess some comeuppance for that. Uh,
I
and
agree. It's all the ballot box, really, because if we're not willing to hold our legislators accountable, they're just going to keep doing what the easy thing to do is, which is to go along with some very well-moneyed lobbyists and
well, and honestly, to give my colleagues some credit, if they've made an assessment of what strategy accomplishes things up here, and they're have probably made an effective assessment. And if they play by the leadership rule, to play with the status quo, um, they're probably on the track they want to be on. But you know, there's something far more important at risk here,
yes.
and that's the Constitution. That's the best interest of the voters, the best interest of the Republican Party, and that's what's being neglected. Because when you have divided loyalties, um, oftentimes you don't get the best the individual has to give, and so we need to somehow change that.
The term rhino, which the establishment Republicans, those are, I mean, I think of establishment Republicans as people who are very willing to compromise the platform, the Republican platform, in order to get along. But one thing I've noticed is they are beginning to do a leftist tactic, which is to divide by calling regular Republicans, actual Republicans who abide by the platform, as ultra conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we overcome this very leftist tactic of trying to divide the grassroots, trying to divide regular Republicans who abide by our platform?
Well, obviously, labels are shorthand, and they're a way to be dismissive of somebody by throwing them into a category and implying that category is negative. Now, the term rhino, I guess, effectively does the same thing. But ultra conservative, I don't find that to be insulting at all. And it's when the left or the Marxists would define a ultra conservative as somebody who's racist or xenophobic or primitive in their relations to other people. I think that's disingenuous, and it's misinforming. And so what we need to do is just be more active in defining who we are, than our opponents. And yeah, there's always going to be that kind of dismissiveness going on, but I don't think we need to really address the labels at all. Just ignore them because they don't mean anything. But what we need to be is relational. And when we're talking to somebody who's prone to accept, the the dismissiveness, we need to say, wait, here's what I believe. What do you believe? And I think we're going to find that most of our neighbors and the other citizens of the state are going to have similar beliefs to us. And so in that sense, that's what we need to explore. But the problem is we don't have enough opportunities really to have the conversation with people. And so I think labels will go on being somewhat effective. But, we can reach out to people who we do have contact with, who we network with, and make them understand that we believe the same thing. We all value the Constitution. We all value our relationships with God. We value our relationships with family. And these things are openly being undermined by the establishment.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful that you mentioned the word relational, because I've noticed that you, as a representative, you attend an awful lot of meetings down in Christian County and the 139th, and you are present and available to your constituents. And I think that is extremely important.
Yeah, it's key.
And
Yep.
So I'm very grateful that you do that, because it's very meaningful for constituents to see that their representative actually cares about what's going on in our district.
Well, and it just shows that you're in touch with the district. And so, I mean, we hear a lot of people saying one thing and then doing a different thing in Jefferson City, and it seems like maybe lobbyists are kind of in control behind the scenes. What would you say is how we could overcome some of that behind the scenes, puppeteering, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, lobbyists are a mixed group. Okay.
Yeah.
We have term limits. So the longest I can be in the House of Representatives is 8 years. And we deal with very weighty subjects. And there's a lot of technical expertise that's needed in order to make good, wise decisions on that. We depend on lobbyists to fill us in on that, but it takes a bit of, wit, a bit of discernment to know who's telling you the truth and who's not. There are good lobbyists and bad lobbyists. And so, this is where, I'm kind of biased. I really, I think I'm 64. Okay. I think life has taught me a lot of lessons. I've learned to be discerning and to use good judgments. I'm not saying every representative has to be 64, okay? But I am saying that helps immensely in trying to sort that out. I don't need this as a job. I really, honestly, to tell you the truth, I'd rather be at home. I really, really would. But so, if I lose my job, that's okay with me. But the thing is, I just want to do the right thing. If I'm going to be up here, I want the right thing to be done, and the right causes to be served. And so I don't want to make a career of it. And so if a lobbyist comes in here with flattering talk, I'm not going to swoon and say, what do you want me to do? I'm going to say, I'm going to ask them questions. Tell me about this. I want to learn about this. Why not this? What's your opponent going to say? And all of this helps me to make a wise judgment. And I hope my batting average is pretty good. I won't claim it's 100%, but the problem is we get some of my colleagues are, let's say, they're more naive. And so they'll go where they get the most attention, and that's I think that's a rut the state's been in for a while. And I don't I've I've just got a wealth of experience. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else, but I am who I am. So 30 years of years in of business experience. 40 years of raising a family. Just my whole life living in Missouri. I think all of these things feed into the experience base that I explore new ideas in, and I just, for me, it's a benefit, and I wish that benefit were available to more of my colleagues.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And also, the desire to be in office, the desire to have a career, I think is actually a negative quality. So reticence to run for office, reticence to be in office, actually, it means that you're doing it for a pure motive, and I find that very refreshing. So many aren't like that, so I appreciate that, and I thank you for that.
Yep.
Yeah. So going forward, do you think that, at least in the short term, that voters are going to have to think about our legislators in a little bit of a different way, not so much passing laws, but maybe stopping bad law from being passed and enacted?
Yes, no, a lot of what I focus on is trying to interrupt the progress of bad bills. Um, less government is better government, without a doubt. And a lot of the bills that are filed have to do with offering additional services to the taxpayers. And the flip side of that is more taxes. So,
Mhm.
I don't, I we've got plenty of state infrastructure. And what we need to do is use that more smartly. And there's only so much that we can do in the legislature to try to get the state executive departments to work smartly. But there's some accountabilities that we can install. I think the budget's a big part. And so what we're trying to accomplish this year is to reduce the budget in opposition to the governor's request to increase the budget. And and I mean, I don't think we're necessarily at odds with the governor, but we do know that it's our constitutional duty to make sure that the amounts that we approve for state expenditure are appropriate and don't put us into a bind when it comes to collecting taxes. Taxes are a sensitive issue, and I to me it's a disjust no, it's an injustice to our citizens to expect them to pay out more and more and more, especially in today's economy.
Right. And it's like an ever expanding understanding of government rather than a steady, a steady state of balance between expenditures and savings. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, when we go through the grocery store, we have to exercise decision-making skills about what we're going to put into our cart. And that's kind of, I guess these days, that's kind of an antiquated analogy. But we can, truth is, there's everything that we could conceivably use, and probably more things that we conceivably need, more things than we can fit in our cart, more things that we can afford. So we have to exercise discretion all the way through the grocery store. And so, when we're passing laws, when we're determining what services we're going to demand from our government, discretion needs to be used there too, because whatever, it's like whatever you put in your shopping cart, you have to pay for. So, there's always that accountability. And, if you buy too much, then you're going to have to forsake something else, some other need, like not paying your utilities, or running up your credit card, or not buying gas. And so, it's easy to sell programs that add to government. But I mean, you can't snap your fingers and pay for those things without adjusting somebody else's lifestyle.
Absolutely. Where do you see the Amendment 3 issue at this point in the House? What's going on with the move to limit what happened with Amendment 3's passing?
Okay, so this is a carnival. Okay,
I know.
it's a carnival. So the priority to everybody, to the whole Republican caucus, the priority this term was to overturn that. It- and so that was our stated priority. There were actions taken, plans made, um, strategies assembled to 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 work on that. And here we are. Oh, what is it like? What are we like 8 or 9 weeks into the session,
Mhm.
and essentially we haven't got off the starting block. Yes, we have bills that are there, but really the problem with the bills is they're all degrees of compromise,
Yes.
and and I get it. We should not be in the position to have to do this because we should have passed IP reform
Yeah.
last year, the year before. It's been a priority of the House for, I want to say like 8 years, and we just don't get it done. And I think every representative, me included, are responsible for that. But ultimately, the leadership controls it. At the end of the session, you find out it was never a priority. Unfortunately, it seems like that's the track we're on right now. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of shows. We got three rings, right? And and there's a lot of movement, but I can't tell that we're going anywhere with it. And like I said, the bills that we see are just increasing bill degrees of a compromise. Now, the Senate has a bill that is fairly static, but I don't know if they're confident about getting it passed over there. And the later you wait in the session, the more the more harmful, more damaging and interrupting the a filibuster would be over there.
Mhm.
And so a sustained filibuster would shut that body down. And so, I think there's a little more anxiety about leading with the Senate bill. And so I think the what we've been doing is working on a House bill, but we've got, the versions of that flip back and forth, whether they're going to um, include this or that or the other thing. And, as long as we keep passing it around and being indecisive about that, it's not getting done. And we're going to find ourselves, I fear, at the end of the session without something accomplished. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, there's all kinds of different variations in the bills that I could describe to you, but it's a moving target at this point. And so I don't know what we're going to end up with, but it's really time for the grassroots to demand that we get a bill done in the House. We get it to the floor leader. I'm confident that if we can get that to the floor leader, who is Alex Riley, um, that we can get a satisfactory outcome on it. Do I mean an ideal bill? No, but at this point, we need to do something. And we need a bill that's going to repeal uh, as much of Amendment 3 as we can.
Oh, we sure do. That thing is so very dangerous. And I'm going to take your message back to the grassroots people I know and tell them we need to focus and demand a resolution to this because
Yes.
it's, yeah.
Well, and honestly, I think the speaker is indifferent,
I do too. I agree.
completely indifferent about it. And so
Mhm.
there needs to be a groundswell of motivation within the body
Mhm.
Okay.
to get the thing wrapped up into the floor leader so we can move it on. And hopefully we end up with a good version of a bill. Again, you know what? We're going to take this to the voters next
Right.
year. So, where there's been a lot of deliberation is in what are the voters going to approve? and many feel like we have just one shot at it. And so, if we demand too much in terms of the repeal, then the voters won't approve it. And if we demand, others say, if we demand too little, then that just means we're going to have to come back over and over and over again. And honestly, it's hard to get my colleagues to face the kind of heat it takes to deal with this kind of issue. It's a charged issue.
Yeah, we need a brave 20 and a brave 30 and a brave 40. I think that would do a great deal to convince people. So
No, I agree, and believe me, that's a lot more achievable than you would expect.
I believe
Because their colleagues are out there. It's
Yeah.
what they need to understand is if they will take a conscientious, hard conservative position, that they will be supported.
Yes,
And
they will.
and what often is kind of a thankless position and a thankless job will be appreciated back in their districts.
Yes,
And
I agree 100% with that. So, what gives you hope for Missouri?
the people, honestly, the grassroots. The Missouri's a great state, and I think we you know by and large are very conservative people. But I think some of our conservative neighbors have been disaffected by the fact that disaffected by the political process, and many of them don't turn out to vote, and I get that. A Republican Party doesn't mean what it should. Now, if you look at the Republican the platform, it's very good and it's very conservative. And if voters were voting Republican based on the platform, I think they'd be very pleased with the outcome of it. The problem is, we get people who run as Republicans who aren't familiar with the platform. And they don't abide by the platform. And so if we had more accountability to the Republican platform, then we would have a Republican Party that our neighbors would have faith in. And so that's a reconciliation we definitely need to do. And but like I said, I think Missouri, by and large, the citizens are conservative people, and they mind their business, they mind their families, they have faith, and they believe in constitutional government. They just don't know how to get there, and so to date, we haven't had enough individuals willing to invest their concern into the Republican Party. And yeah, we're a supermajority, but we need truly conservative and Republican candidates to be serving in this body. And I think when we get there, we'll be happy. But Missouri is, like I said, to be redundant, Missouri is a conservative state, and we deserve better. And we need a state government that does big, bold, conservative things. And we've got rival states not too far from us who are doing much better than we are. And so, if the shame of that should be enough to motivate us to do better. But unfortunately, I really think it's going to take a groundswell of grassroots interest and accountability to turn that corner.
Do you have any prayer direction for people as far as the legislation?
Do I have clear direction on
Prayer,
that?
a prayer, like what if you could ask people to pray? Would there be specifics that you would ask for? What kind of prayer would the people of Missouri need for change, real change in the legislature?
Because so let me frame that a little bit. I believe in a sovereign God, and I believe He's all powerful, he's involved with his people. I think, he lives in our hearts, and I think he guides us, and that's the kind of relationship that we have with God, and I think he's aware of what we need. He's also in many different senses. Sometimes what we need is not perfection. Well, sometimes you see the pattern in the Bible that hardship. He brings hardship to his people, and that refines them. And I'm not volunteering for any hardship. I, I don't. I don't want to do that, but I do trust the Lord, both in my individual life and in my family, to to bring sufficient hardship to us that we never ever take him for granted, number one, and number two, that we're not tempted to sink our roots into this world, which is perishable. So uh, so the prayer I think that I would offer is that God work through his people, and that he caused them to be faithful, and more believing in the fact that God has his hand on the state of Missouri. Um, I I I don't have a lot of fear because I know that God is sovereign and in control. But yet, we've got chaos all around him. God does not author chaos.
No.
And so, right. But what we need are people who trust in him rather than being distracted by the chaos. And honestly, I think if people pray to get their frame of reference, I guess, well, I'm trying to get their frame of reference more disciplined like that. I think it would be good for everybody. But I do I love miracles. I'll just put it that way. Do I think we need miracles? No, I just think we need faithful believers.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I think you're right. Now, when you're up in Jeff City, what's your favorite restaurant up there?
That's a good question. Let's see. I can tell you where we go a lot. My favorite restaurants down here or up here are really not much different than my favorite restaurants back home. And,
Um,
and my favorite evening at a restaurant is with my wife, on a date, and we'll go to a franchise restaurant just simply because the product of that is predictable.
right.
And we don't have to make a lot of choices. Well, speaking for myself, I tend to get the same thing every time. And I lay that at the feet. I'm a father of a large family. And so for a lot of years, when Tammy, that's my wife, when we go out on a date, we were just looking for less chaos and more predictability. So we
Yeah.
would go and just kind of enjoy things. Well, I don't, and to be clear, my children never presented us any problem, but especially when they're young, they tend to be need factories. so so you're always responding to that, and it's not a process that lends itself to an assembly line type of response. But yeah, so going back to restaurants, what I enjoy doing is just going to a restaurant where we can sit well, I go with my colleagues, and we enjoy some fellowship and some good food. The best food I reserve for my dates with my wife,
There you go.
because I appreciate her
Right.
company more than anybody's.
Right, right. Well, that's what now you have 10 children
Yes, that's correct, and 17 grandkids.
and 17. Now this one has 5.
Yep.
So she hasn't reached
Yeah,
your height.
I haven't caught up to you quite yet. But,
No, well, yeah, you've got a few years. You've got a few years. But let me. And this is funny because I was an agent with a major insurance franchise for years. I think when they hired me, I had 4 children, and the district manager who was hiring me at the time, you know, kind of mentioned that she was gonna hire me in spite of the fact that I had 4 kids. Because for somebody who's supposed to be out building a business, children and family can be a major distraction. And uh, it was kind of funny so I worked really hard. I worked really long hours. Uh, the Lord blessed me, and really, I didn't have any choice. I had a lot of mouths to feed. So, 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 the Lord blessed us. But it's funny when I didn't tell her when our 5th came along. I kind of predicted her response. One of my colleagues, having fun with me, we were all sitting around a table, uh, asked me, and she was right next to me, said, "So Bob, how many children do you have now?" and and I reluctantly answered that, "Oh, 5." And it was in till the time that she left that company, she never spoke to me. So she wouldn't speak to me again. And unfortunately, that's kind of the corporate environment these days. Is that they want to pick your friends for you, and they want you to value the opportunities they give you more than the opportunities of family. And sadly, that's kind of it. But that was the 5th child, and it's kind of funny when you have 4 children. That's kind of a little socially
borderline. That's borderline.
borderline. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you go, okay, 4 is pushing it, right?
Right.
Now, when you have 5, that's an act of civil disobedience, right?
Absolutely. You're
Okay.
immediately like,
Right. Exactly. So, hey, this is deliberate.
huh?
And so they start treating you like that. And so you might as well go for broke. 20 sounds like a good number, I think.
Oh, no.
No,
Oh.
I mean, however the Lord blesses you. But honestly, let me say this about family. Tammy and I have never ever regretted having so many children, and the only the advantage of having more kids beyond your 4th, or 5th, is the fact that the only difference is you just don't put your parenting skills on the shelf, and they don't retire because you keep using them over and over and over, and guess what? They stay sharp, and they get better and better and better. You're your early kids, your older kids at this point,
Mhm.
they're changing all the time, and so your parenting skills will expand
Sure.
to tackle new problems, right? But the fact is, for all the ones that follow, it's a piece of cake, and if you keep
Oh, I
you
feel
keep
like
your
I've had to throw out the manual with each kid.
She's got a redhead.
Yeah, the
He's
5th
red.
child is a redhead, so I've seen it.
well, you can thank God for that.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's got confidence in you.
I know.
But that's and that's challenging to have, but it's a blessing. It's a real blessing to have children that think for themselves, and that's really one of the major benefit of homeschooling is your kids don't become so peer dependent, and they don't have people deciding who they're going to be morally, and they let how antiquated is this? They let their parents kind of describe what their moral environment will be, and that's a good thing. And if you can keep your older kids on track, the rest of them will just follow right along. So it does make it a lot easier. But
That's a lot of wisdom right there. Thank you for that. It's a biblical worldview versus a kind of secular worldview where one or two kids is all you can handle.
Mhm.
But what you're expressing is that your wisdom grows with each child, really, and your experience grows, and I think that's probably helped you a great deal as a representative.
Well,
So
no, I think so. I think everything kind of works together, as the Bible says, to shape you into the, you know, the, you know, the positions the Lord's going to put you in. And just parenting, just parenting in general tends to knock off your sharp edges
yeah,
and and teach you an unnatural kind of selflessness. And so that's a good thing.
yeah.
And but yeah, I'm grateful for all that refinement. My wife would admit that I'm not refined enough, but
We all
but
say that about our husbands.
you have to. But it's a tremendous experience, and yes, it has. I think it helps me in the legislature not to. uh, I mean, I'm well, I'm my own person, but I don't fret about whether people are going to like me.
Yeah.
I don't fret about whether they're going to approve of what I say and do. I really only fret about pleasing the Lord and doing the right thing. And so like I said, I don't know that I have 100% track record, but that is my focus, my goal.
Well, you're in good company with David and Moses and all the rest. So
Okay.
none of them have a perfect track record either. So
Awesome.
yeah. Uh, do you have any last message for all the people in the 139th? What should we be doing to support? Yeah.
Well, I think the most important message, I think for the most part, the people in my district or I'm in their district in 139, um, I think for the most part, we have our priorities in line.
Mhm.
And we're focused on our families, and we're focused on church, and we're focused on you, you know taking care of our responsibilities. And if I was going to try to provoke uh, the people in that district, is just not to take all that for granted, because it is perishable. We could lose it easy. And if District 139 and Christian County as a whole is a pocket of conservatism in the state, we need to make it broader than that. And it's something that could easily go away. And there's a lot of political actors out there who would be who are working hard to make that the case. They would love for Christian County to be more like Springfield.
Mhm.
I know.
True.
But I don't want to be that, and I don't
And
want to have to move away from Christian County to maintain the kind of privacy and freedoms that we have there. And so uh, I, what I would do is admonish the people of District 139 to not take their freedoms for granted, and not to take their government for granted too, and accountability. Just uh, I like to use this analogy a lot. Okay, government is like taking care of your car. Okay, your car, to be safe, requires routine maintenance, and you have to spend a little money on it. You have to change the oil. You need new tires when they're bald, uh, things like that. Because a safe car is really, really essential to keep your family safe when you're cruising down the road. Well, right now, I would classify our government, both federally and statewide, as unsafe,
mhm.
because I think for the most part we have neglected to hold some of the to do some of those accountabilities, to spend a
Yeah.
little money on having good, solid political people represent you. And so I'm not making a pitch for campaign contributions, by the way, but think about it. To get, like, let's talk about the school board. The school board in Nixa or Ozark, those people who are running, if we get good conservative people, they have to have money for signs. They have to have money for advertising. And we're not talking a boatload of money. We're just talking about a little money. But if everybody contributes a little bit, then that amasses to a lot. But the other part of that is just time. It's, getting out and speaking on behalf of good, solid conservative candidates. Going to meetings and supporting them, especially when their position seems to be in a minority in whatever body we're talking about. But like I said, in Christian County, I think for the most part, we're getting it right. I think you two have been front and center on the whole library board thing. But see, that's a model of citizen involvement.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've seen people who've turned to me and my colleagues saying, fix this. But we can pass laws, but laws just inhibit our liberties just a little bit more. Having people involved in Christian County to hold the library accountable for just common sense standards, that's all we need is people to turn out and do that. And I think the Christian County Library is a good model of that. And now we've turned out people to get things changed. We need to turn out people to keep it that way.
There you go.
And iron out some of the wrinkles, and if people don't take that for granted, then we will keep a good library. But that goes for all of our government.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Representative Titus. We appreciate it. And will you come back at the end of the session and let us know how everything went?
Yep, an update.
Okay. I hope I come back and I say I was all wrong, that things turned out perfectly. And so I'll hang on to that optimism. So next we talk, I'll be eating crow and saying that I was all wrong, and things turned out better than we thought.
All right. Well, we will hold you to that. And thank you again so much. We appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and your viewers. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You
God
too.
bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God bless you.